Picture this scene. Young Simba and Nala have just escaped the elephant graveyard, and Mufasa arrives to save them from the hyenas. Most viewers see a heroic father rescuing his son from deadly enemies. But watch this sequence again, and something doesn't quite add up. The timing is too perfect. The hyenas retreat too easily, and Mufasa's reaction? It's far too controlled for a father who just discovered his son in mortal danger. Let's break down what actually happens frame by frame, because the devil is in the details that Disney hoped you wouldn't notice. When Mufasa first appears at the elephant graveyard, watch his body language carefully. There's no panic in his movements, no desperate charge of a protective parent. Instead, there's this calculated pause, almost like he's assessing a situation he already understands rather than discovering a crisis in progress. Think about what a real parent would do, finding their child surrounded by deadly predators. You'd expect immediate action, right? Roaring, charging, creating maximum chaos to scatter the threat. But Mufasa doesn't do any of that. He approaches with measured steps, like someone walking into a boardroom for a scheduled meeting. Now look at the hyena's behavior. These are supposedly the most dangerous predators in the Pride Lands, the sworn enemies of all lions. Yet they back down from a single lion without putting up any real fight. Shenzi, their pack leader, shows what can only be described as deference rather than defiance. She doesn't retreat like a defeated enemy. She withdraws like someone whose orders have just changed. But here's where it gets really interesting. Consider the logistics of Mufasa's arrival. The elephant graveyard lies deep in hyena territory, described throughout the film as forbidden and dangerous. Yet somehow, the king of Pride Rock navigates directly to his son's exact location with suspicious efficiency. How does he know the safe passages through enemy territory? How does he move through the most dangerous region of his domain without encountering a single hyena patrol or scout on the way? The elephant graveyard isn't exactly a small place. It's vast, maze-like, filled with countless hiding spots and dead ends. Unless, of course, he's been there before. Many times. Watch Zazu's behavior during this entire sequence. The royal advisor seems genuinely shocked by their location and the immediate danger. His surprise reactions contrast sharply with Mufasa's composed demeanor, suggesting the hornbill was deliberately kept out of whatever arrangement might exist between his king and these supposed enemies. This exclusion makes sense if you're trying to maintain plausible deniability. Zazu's gossipy nature and tendency toward moral absolutism would make him a terrible confidant for delicate political negotiations that require discretion. The elephant graveyard itself deserves closer examination. It's described as a place where no one goes and no one gets out alive, yet it's clearly been used as some kind of meeting ground for quite some time. The scattered bones create perfect natural concealment for discreet gatherings, and its reputation for danger ensures privacy from unwanted observers. In other words, it's the perfect location for clandestine diplomatic meetings. Notice how the hyenas respond to Mufasa's authority. There's no territorial posturing, no challenge to his presence in their supposed domain. They recognize his right to be there because, and here's the crucial part, he's been there before. This isn't an invasion, it's a disrupted appointment. The real smoking gun comes in the aftermath. Rather than launching a military campaign to eliminate the hyena threat, or securing the borders after his son nearly lost his life to enemies, Mufasa simply returns home and delivers a lecture about responsibility. For a king whose heir just faced mortal danger from sworn enemies, his response seems remarkably restrained. Almost like the incident was more of a diplomatic embarrassment than an actual security breach. The elephant graveyard scene isn't a rescue mission, it's damage control. Simba and Nala stumbled into something they weren't supposed to see, forcing Mufasa to improvise a cover story that would protect both his secret arrangements and his carefully maintained public image. But if Mufasa really was meeting secretly with the hyenas, the question becomes, why? What could possibly motivate the noble king of Pride Rock to form alliances with the very creatures his kingdom views as enemies? The answer lies in understanding the true complexity of ruling the Pride Lands, and the impossible choices that even the wisest kings sometimes have to make. To understand why Mufasa might form a secret alliance with the hyenas, we need to examine the brutal realities of governing the Pride Lands. This isn't just about ruling a kingdom. It's about managing one of the most complex ecosystems on Earth, where every decision about predator populations can trigger cascading effects throughout the entire food chain. The Pride Lands operate on a delicate balance that requires constant intervention to maintain. Completely eliminating the hyenas would create an ecological disaster. These scavengers and hunters serve crucial roles in population control and waste management that keep the savanna healthy, but allowing them to roam freely would threaten the herbivore populations that sustain the entire kingdom. So what's a wise king to do? The obvious answer is to find a middle ground, and the most effective middle ground involves direct negotiation with the hyena clans. Think about Mufasa's reputation throughout the film. He's known as the wise king, the problem solver, the leader who always finds peaceful solutions to complex challenges. But what if some of those problems were manufactured? What if the periodic hyena raids and territorial disputes served a dual purpose? Creating situations where Mufasa could demonstrate his leadership while secretly coordinating with the very enemies he appeared to defeat. This arrangement would be mutually beneficial on multiple levels. The hyenas gain access to controlled hunting grounds within Pride Lands territory, protection from rival predator groups, and a reliable food source through carefully managed conflicts. Meanwhile, Mufasa maintains the appearance of defending his territory against external threats, while actually controlling those threats from within. Look at the timing of hyena activities throughout the film. Their raids and incursions coincide suspiciously with moments when Mufasa needs to demonstrate strength or unite his subjects against a common enemy. The attacks are always aggressive enough to seem genuine, but never quite successful enough to cause real damage to the kingdom's stability. It's political theater at its finest. Consider Mufasa's extensive knowledge of Outlands politics and hyena social structures. His understanding of pack dynamics, territorial boundaries, and clan hierarchies suggests regular communication rather than distant observation. A king who truly viewed hyenas as mortal enemies would delegate such intelligence gathering to subordinates rather than personally maintaining such detailed knowledge. But Mufasa knows which hyenas lead which packs, understands their motivations, and can predict their behavior with remarkable accuracy. This isn't the knowledge of an enemy, it's the insight of a partner. The elephant graveyard serves as the perfect meeting location for these negotiations. Its reputation as forbidden territory ensures absolute privacy, while its neutral status provides safety for both parties. The location's association with danger and doom means that even the most curious Pridelanders would never venture there voluntarily. Most importantly, Zazu's exclusion from these arrangements makes perfect strategic sense. The Hornbill's tendency toward gossip and moral absolutism would make him a liability in delicate political negotiations. His shock and genuine fear during the elephant graveyard incident prove he had no knowledge of any ongoing diplomatic relationship. By keeping his advisor uninformed, Mufasa maintains plausible deniability while ensuring operational security for his most sensitive foreign policy initiatives. This reframes many of Mufasa's decisions throughout the story. His measured responses to hyena incursions, his reluctance to pursue aggressive military solutions, and his constant emphasis on balance over dominance all support the existence of a carefully managed détente rather than genuine conflict. Remember the circle of life speech? Mufasa explains to young Simba that when we pass on, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. But he conveniently leaves out the part about who controls the predators that hunt the antelope. That's not natural balance, that's managed ecosystem engineering. The tragic irony becomes clear. Mufasa's greatest strength as a leader, his ability to find diplomatic solutions to impossible problems, ultimately created the vulnerabilities that led to his downfall. His secret negotiations required a level of trust and coordination that could easily be weaponized by someone who discovered the arrangement. And someone did discover it. Someone who had access to royal movements, knowledge of secret meeting locations, and intimate familiarity with hyena culture. Someone who realized that the noble king of Pride Rock was maintaining his reputation through the very type of backroom dealing that contradicted everything he publicly claimed to represent. That someone was Scar, and once he understood the true nature of his brother's relationship with the hyenas, everything changed. The question isn't whether Scar was jealous of Mufasa's position. It's whether he was disgusted by the methods Mufasa used to maintain that position. And that disgust might have motivated something far more dangerous than simple sibling rivalry. It might have motivated a righteous crusade to expose the truth. Here's where everything we thought we knew about the Lion King gets turned upside down. Because if Mufasa really was maintaining secret alliances with the hyenas, then Scar's entire character arc takes on a completely different meaning. Think about Scar's behavior throughout the film. His intimate knowledge of hyena culture, his comfortable presence in the elephant graveyard, his casual interactions with pack leaders. None of this suggests someone building alliances from scratch. It all points to someone who already understands existing relationships. Watch the famous "Be Prepared" sequence again, but this time, don't see it as Scar recruiting enemies to betray Mufasa. See it as Scar exposing allies who were already betraying the Pride Land's public trust. The hyenas aren't shocked by Scar's proposition. They're intrigued by his offer of a better deal. Shenzi's response isn't, "How dare you suggest we work with lions?" It's, "What's in it for us?" These aren't sworn enemies being converted. These are existing partners being presented with improved terms. Scar isn't building a conspiracy. He's hijacking one that already existed. This completely recontextualizes Scar's bitterness toward his brother. Rather than simple sibling rivalry over succession rights, his resentment stems from discovering Mufasa's fundamental hypocrisy. The brother he looked up to, the king he served loyally, was maintaining his perfect reputation through exactly the kind of secret deals and moral compromises that contradicted everything the crown publicly represented. Imagine being Scar in that moment of discovery. You've spent your entire life believing in your brother's wisdom and integrity, only to learn that his greatest triumphs were built on deception. The rightful king rhetoric that Scar uses throughout the film gains entirely new weight when viewed as moral indignation rather than mere ambition. He's not claiming the throne because he wants power. He's claiming it because he believes Mufasa has forfeited his moral authority to rule. The hyenas' remarkably quick acceptance of Scar's leadership makes perfect sense in this framework. They aren't abandoning their hatred of lions to follow a new master. They're transferring their existing royal alliance to a monarch who promises better terms and fewer restrictions. Their familiarity with Pride Rock politics, their understanding of royal succession, and their immediate comfort with palace life all suggest previous involvement in kingdom affairs. These aren't outsiders being brought into the system. They're insiders finally being acknowledged publicly. Scar's knowledge of the gorge location, the timing of the wildebeest migration, and Mufasa's daily routines indicates access to detailed intelligence about royal activities. This information could only come from sources close to the king, sources like hyena allies who had been tracking royal movements as part of their ongoing arrangement with the crown. The tragic irony deepens when you realize that Scar's subsequent rule represents brutal honesty about relationships that had previously existed in shadow. His open alliance with the hyenas isn't a betrayal of Prideland's values. It's transparency about the actual power structure that had been operating behind closed doors for years. The ecological disaster that follows Scar's takeover doesn't result from introducing hyenas to the Pridelands. It results from removing the careful limitations and secret protocols that had governed their presence under Mufasa's management. When you take a delicate diplomatic arrangement and make it public without proper transition planning, chaos becomes inevitable. Scar's transformation from loyal brother to bitter enemy follows a classic pattern. The whistleblower who becomes corrupted by the very system he sought to expose. His discovery of Mufasa's duplicity doesn't just anger him, it breaks something fundamental in his worldview. If the most noble king in Prideland's history maintains power through secret deals with supposed enemies, what does that say about the nature of leadership itself? If wisdom and integrity are just carefully managed public images, then perhaps the only honest response is to embrace the darkness openly. This explains the psychological journey that turns Scar from potential ally into destructive force. His disillusionment stems not from being passed over for succession, but from realizing that the brother he admired was never the lion he pretended to be. The real tragedy lies in the missed opportunity for evolution. Had Mufasa acknowledged his diplomatic relationships openly, the Pridelands might have developed toward a more inclusive model of governance. The hyenas could have been integrated as legitimate stakeholders rather than secret partners. Instead, the secrecy created vulnerabilities that Scar ultimately exploited, leading to the very chaos and destruction that the original arrangements were designed to prevent. But here's the most disturbing part of this theory. Scar might not have been wrong. His methods were clearly destructive, but his core criticism of Mufasa's leadership might have been completely justified. The villain of our childhood might have been trying to expose a system of governance built on fundamental deception. Which brings us to the most crucial moment in the entire film. The confrontation at the gorge where everything hidden finally comes to light. The stampede sequence at the gorge represents the climactic moment where private politics collide with public accountability. But when viewed through the lens of Mufasa's secret hyena alliance, this scene transforms from simple fratricide into something far more complex. A carefully orchestrated political exposure designed to force the truth into the open. Scar's plan wasn't just to eliminate his brother and nephew. It was to create a situation where Mufasa would be forced to choose publicly between maintaining his secret arrangements and protecting his family. The gorge becomes a stage where hidden relationships meet unavoidable consequences. Consider Mufasa's decision to handle the rescue personally rather than mobilizing the royal guard or coordinating with available allies. For a king facing a crisis involving his heir, this choice seems strategically questionable unless you understand the political complications involved. A monarch with secret hyena contacts couldn't risk bringing witnesses to a situation that might require calling on those very allies for assistance. Palace guards discovering their king coordinating with supposed enemies would create a scandal that could destabilize the entire kingdom. Better to handle the crisis alone and maintain the secrecy that had preserved political stability for years. But Scar understood this limitation and weaponized it against his brother. The timing of the trap reveals sophisticated knowledge of both royal protocols and hyena territorial behavior. Scar knew exactly when the wildebeest would be migrating through the gorge, precisely how Mufasa would respond to threats against Simba, and specifically which routes the king would use to avoid detection while moving through contested territory. This intelligence could only come from someone with access to the highest levels of both Pride Rock and hyena clan planning. Someone who understood the secret communication channels that existed between the throne and the Outlands. When Mufasa arrives at the gorge and begins his desperate rescue attempt, watch his movements carefully. He's not just trying to save his son, he's trying to do it without revealing the resources that might actually be available to help. The king, who supposedly commands absolute authority over his domain, is operating under severe constraints that most viewers never recognize. The hyena's absence during this critical moment reveals the conditional nature of their alliance with the crown. Their arrangement with Mufasa was transactional rather than emotional, based on mutual benefit rather than loyalty or genuine partnership. When Scar presented them with better terms and fewer restrictions, their choice became inevitable. They weren't betraying Mufasa, they were renegotiating their contract with new management. Simba's presence complicates the entire equation in ways that even Scar might not have fully anticipated. The young prince's involvement transforms what could have been a private political confrontation into a family tragedy that would have lasting consequences for the entire Pride Lands. Mufasa finds himself caught between protecting his son, maintaining his political secrets, and managing a crisis that threatens to expose everything he's worked to keep hidden. The stampede becomes a perfect metaphor for the uncontrolled chaos that results when carefully maintained political arrangements suddenly collapse. Just as the wildebeest rampage destroys everything in their path, the exposure of secret alliances threatens to trample the delicate balance that had maintained peace and prosperity throughout the kingdom. The most crucial moment comes when Scar positions himself above his trapped brother and delivers the famous line, "Long live the king." But listen to the delivery again. This isn't the gleeful taunt of a successful murderer. It's the bitter pronouncement of someone delivering political justice. Scar isn't just ending his brother's life. He's ending the hypocrisy that had defined Mufasa's reign. The phrase takes on new meaning when viewed as a statement about the kind of king the Pride Lands deserves, rather than a simple declaration of succession. Mufasa's final expression deserves careful analysis because it reveals recognition rather than surprise. This isn't the look of someone being betrayed by a trusted family member. It's the face of someone realizing that his carefully guarded secrets have been discovered and weaponized against him. In that moment, Mufasa understands that Scar knows about the hyena arrangements, that those relationships have been turned against him, and that there's no remaining path to damage control. His last look carries the weight of someone whose entire political strategy has been exposed and exploited. The tragic irony culminates in understanding that Mufasa's death wasn't caused by his love for his son, but by his inability to reconcile his public image with his private methods. The king, who built his reputation on transparency and wisdom, ultimately became victim to the very secrecy that had enabled his success. Scar's positioning during the rescue attempt suggests calculated observation rather than spontaneous opportunity. He waits for the precise moment when Mufasa is most vulnerable, not physically, but politically, before making his revelation. The timing ensures maximum impact while eliminating any possibility of recovery or explanation. The gorge incident represents the culmination of years of hidden tensions and moral compromises finally reaching their breaking point. What appears to be sudden family violence was actually the inevitable result of unsustainable political contradictions that had been building throughout Mufasa's reign. But this reinterpretation raises uncomfortable questions about what comes next. If Scar's criticism of his brother contained elements of truth, what does that mean for Simba's eventual return and restoration? Does the young king learn from his father's mistakes, or does he simply repeat the same patterns under different circumstances? When Simba finally returns to reclaim the Pride Lands, his actions reveal either sophisticated political calculation or disturbing ignorance of the forces that shaped his father's reign. The speed and thoroughness with which he banishes the hyenas suggests preparation rather than spontaneous decision-making, almost as if he understood exactly what relationships needed to be severed to restore his version of legitimate rule. But here's what makes Simba's restoration so unsettling. His reign appears remarkably stable for someone taking control after years of ecological disaster and political chaos. The Pride Lands recover with suspicious efficiency, the animal populations rebalance almost immediately, and potential threats seem to vanish without trace. This level of success suggests either incredible luck or inherited knowledge of governing techniques that his father had developed through years of careful political management. The question becomes, did Simba learn from Mufasa's mistakes by choosing transparency over secrecy, or did he simply become more sophisticated about hiding the same essential compromises? Watch how Simba handles subsequent threats throughout the extended Lion King universe. His approaches to conflict resolution consistently favor behind-the-scenes negotiation over direct confrontation, suggesting familiarity with diplomatic methods that go beyond what most monarchs would consider conventional. His sophisticated understanding of territorial politics, predator dynamics, and interspecies relationships indicates education that extends far beyond the basic leadership training shown in the original film. Someone taught him about the complex realities of governing a diverse ecosystem, and that someone was likely Mufasa himself, through lessons that were never meant for public consumption. The convenient narrative positioning Scar as absolutely evil serves multiple purposes in legitimizing Simba's rule. By framing his uncle as purely malevolent, the new king avoids uncomfortable questions about the systemic issues that enabled Scar's rise to power in the first place. The focus on personal betrayal and family drama obscures larger questions about royal accountability, transparent governance, and the moral compromises that effective leadership sometimes requires. It's easier to blame individual corruption than examine structural problems that might implicate the entire system of monarchy. But the most telling evidence comes from analyzing what doesn't happen after Simba's restoration. The hyenas disappear completely from Pride Lands territory, yet there's no indication of military campaigns or border conflicts to enforce this exile. They simply vanish, as if some arrangement had been reached that satisfied all parties involved. This suggests either genocide, which would be completely inconsistent with Simba's character, or negotiated relocation that provided the hyenas with alternative territories and resources. The latter option requires exactly the kind of diplomatic relationships that his father had supposedly never maintained. The circle of life philosophy takes on darker implications when viewed as justification for necessary political compromises rather than celebration of natural balance. The emphasis on accepting one's place in the established order could serve to discourage questioning of arrangements that benefit those in power while maintaining popular support. Modern audiences might recognize uncomfortably familiar patterns in this interpretation. The tendency of leaders to maintain beneficial relationships with questionable allies while publicly condemning them reflects political realities that extend far beyond animated kingdoms. The challenge of balancing pragmatic governance with moral principles, the necessity of managing public perception while handling complex negotiations, and the cost of maintaining power in systems that demand both effectiveness and purity, these dilemmas resonate across cultures and historical periods. The Lion King's enduring popularity might stem partially from its sophisticated treatment of political complexity, disguised as straightforward moral storytelling. The surface narrative of good versus evil provides emotional satisfaction, while the underlying themes of compromise, secrecy, and leadership costs offer deeper engagement for audiences willing to examine the details. This reinterpretation doesn't diminish Mufasa's character so much as humanize him in ways that Disney probably never intended. The wise king becomes a complex leader struggling with impossible choices, forced to balance idealistic principles against practical necessities in a world that punishes both weakness and moral absolutism. His secret alliance with the hyenas represents the kind of moral ambiguity that defines real leadership, rather than the clear-cut heroism that children's stories typically celebrate. The tragedy lies not in Mufasa's choices, but in a political system that required such secrecy to function effectively. Perhaps the most unsettling question raised by this theory concerns other Disney monarchs and their methods of maintaining power. If Mufasa, the gold standard of animated leadership, required secret alliances and hidden compromises to govern effectively, what arrangements might other beloved characters have made to preserve their kingdoms? What deals did King Triton strike to maintain underwater harmony? How did the beast manage his territorial borders during his cursed years? What political accommodations allowed Elsa to build her ice kingdom without triggering international conflicts? The more you examine Disney's royal characters through this lens, the more questions emerge about the true costs of the peace and prosperity that their stories celebrate. The Magic Kingdom might be built on more complex foundations than any of us wanted to acknowledge. But maybe that's exactly what makes these stories so enduring. They work on multiple levels, providing comfort through simple moral categories while subtly preparing audiences for the complex realities of power, leadership, and the compromises that even the best intentions sometimes require. The Pride Lands remain a kingdom worth examining, not for its simple lessons about good and evil, but for its honest portrayal of the impossible choices that real leadership demands. And if that interpretation makes us uncomfortable about our childhood heroes, perhaps that discomfort is exactly what we need to develop more sophisticated understanding of the world we actually inhabit. The circle of life continues, but maybe it's time we started asking harder questions about what that cycle really includes, and what we've been choosing not to see.